scheduled to vote on some bills being considered under suspension of the rules. They did debate those bills earlier today, 3 of them. One would transfer federal land in South Dakota to local communities. Another would put land in Arizona into a trust, and a third for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
Previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order: H.R. 588, H.R. 291, and H.R. 507, in each case by the yeas and nays. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 588, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 16, H.R. 588, a bill to provide for donor contribution acknowledgments to be displayed at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Visitor Center and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The names of the so-called whistleblower witnesses on Benghazi have been revealed, the individuals who will testify this coming Wednesday before the House Oversight Committee. One of them is Greg Hicks, who, as you know, is the Deputy Chief of Mission in Libya at the time of the attacks, who, with the death of Ambassador Stevens, became the highest-ranking U.S. diplomat in Libya. One of the last people to speak to Ambassador Stevens on the night of those attacks. One of the other witnesses is Mark Thompson, for 6 years now, a senior official in the State Department's Counterterrorism Bureau. First, before we get to the specifics of what they're expected to testify, I wonder if you could provide us with your assessment of the caliber of these 2 individuals. Are they credible? They've been working at fairly senior posts here and abroad for years and years. I wonder first what thoughts the Department has about the caliber of these 2 individuals.
I mean, it's a little bit hard for us to, given that we don't have a lot of information about how the hearing was scheduled and the various sort of formation of the majority's decision to have this hearing, it's a little bit hard to comment on the witnesses. Let me say one thing here, though, at the very top. We have always encouraged any State Department employee who wants to share their personal story, whether it be to the ARB or the Congress, to tell the truth, period. Full stop, end of story. That's long been our position, and we've made that clear from the start. In terms of these particular individuals, you know, the committee didn't come to us asking witnesses. We found out through the media and through the announcement the same way you all did. In terms of these potential transcripts out there, we haven't seen the transcripts. So,
oh, yes, you have. Come on, Patrick.
We have seen excerpts of these transcripts, but we do not have them, and they have not been provided to us.
I mean, you know the gist of what they're saying and what their arguments are. First of all, Greg Hicks makes charges that he thought that there were assets in Libya that could have been able to be sent from Tripoli to Benghazi that night, and they were rejected. I mean, there are numerous charges that he makes.
Let the record reflect that was CNN asking that question and not Fox.
Right. Well,
please continue.
Let me just say that this has been made, these statements have been made to the media. They haven't been made to us. Now, we understand this testimony is going to go forward, and we want people to go and tell the truth. But in terms of the full context of these remarks or these sort of accusations, we don't have the full context, so it's hard for us to respond.
Okay, so, you know, but just what do you make of the idea that more could have been done that night, sending assets from Tripoli to Benghazi, and that they weren't?
Well, again, it's hard for me to respond to specific allegations not having the full context. Let me say this, though, and I said this last week. I can't remember if you were here, Elise, on Friday, but these issues have been addressed and reviewed in great detail by the Accountability Review Board. There were 8 hearings, 30 briefings, 25,000 documents. The ARB interviewed over 100 witnesses, including people on the ground. And the ARB's credible, comprehensive process was led by Ambassador Thomas Pickering and Admiral Michael Mullen. But let me finish, because not everybody does, and it's worth saying this, that these are 2 of the most respected, nonpartisan leaders in Washington, each highly praised by both sides of the aisle for their long distinguished careers. They put out a statement today saying that from the beginning of the ARB process, they had unfettered access to everyone and everything, including all the documentation they needed.
Except Secretary Clinton. Except Secretary Clinton. Right? They did not have access to Secretary Clinton.
Secretary Clinton addressed this in her public testimony of some 8 hours on Capitol Hill, where she...
5 hours, and she did not. I checked the transcript this morning. She never discloses in there whether she talked to the ARB or Accountability Review Board. If you search it by text, it's not in there. But they did not have access to her, correct?
Again, she spoke to this. I'd be happy after the briefing to get you the exact transcript.
I'm asking a very simple question, Patrick. Did they have access to her? Did they interview her?
Again, the ARB...
They did not, correct?
Mr. Rosen.
Correct.
Mr. Rosen, the ARB is an independent body. They can choose who they want to interview. We have 2 of the most respected people in Washington chose who they wanted to interview and needed to interview for the information that they needed.
So
I will get you...
They decided they didn't need to talk to...
Let me finish. I will find you the quote where former Secretary Clinton talks about this and her willingness if the ARB needed to talk to her to do so. They didn't, and that was their decision. And they felt that based on the people that they were able to talk to, they had a complete picture.
Before my questioning was hijacked by my esteemed
wait, can I just...
I wanted to ask one thing, and this is what I...
James
No, I understand. I was in the middle of asking him something. I understand.
All right, one at a time.
Wait, can I just ask...
Go ahead, Matt.
To the best of your knowledge, did the ARB talk to everyone that they wanted to?
My understanding is that they did, and they've said that publicly.
Are you in a position to actually speak for them?
I am not.
No. So this statement, I haven't seen it. Did Pickering and Mullen put out a statement?
Yeah.
Okay. And does it address this?
This is it. It's 2 sentences.
We had unfettered access to everyone and everything, including all the documentation we needed.
Yeah. Okay. And from the very beginning, let me also say this Department of State, when the board was convened, our message out was that everybody should cooperate with this board, and that if anybody had anything to raise, there was an email address and a telephone number provided to get in touch with the board.
Was Secretary Clinton involved in some of the early decision-making related to Benghazi?
Again, you're asking me to talk about things that are...
It's a fairly simple thing, Patrick. Was she involved in some of the early decision-making regarding Benghazi?
I don't know. Which part are you referring to?
After the attacks became known to the National Security Council? Was she involved in the decision-making?
I'd be happy after this briefing, Mr. Rosen, to get you the entire transcript of what she said over many hours on Capitol Hill, which answers many of your questions. Part of this is you're bringing up information that's out there that's been answered.
She was involved as a member of the National Security Council in the decision-making regarding this incident that affected her employees, that she would be relevant to the ARB's...
James, she spoke at great length to this, and I will get you the transcript after this briefing.
Let me just go back to the question I started with, okay? And as I tried to put it to you, without respect to the specific charges that we expect these 2 individuals to be testifying to, can you just say, are Greg Hicks and Mark Thompson credible people? Are they not long-standing career State Department employees? Are they credible?
Again, I'm not going to assess one individual or another. These are some folks who have said they're going to come out and tell a story to Congress. And our message, let me finish.
Do they still work here?
Our message is we have always encouraged State Department employees who want to share their personal story, whether to the ARB or Congress, to tell the truth, period. And so they have an opportunity to do that if that's what they choose to do.
Have they had distinguished careers here?
Again, I'm not in a place to assess their bios and their work experience, but these are people who work inside the State Department. Go ahead.
On exactly that point.
Can you identify yourself?
Terry Jeffrey of CNS News.
Okay.
Okay. Another witness that's going to testify in the Oversight Committee on Wednesday is Eric Nordstrom, who is the Regional Security Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli until July 26, 2012, when he left 6 weeks before the attack. So as you know, a different individual was the RSO in Tripoli at the time of the attack. Also, there was a temporary duty RSO in Benghazi who was actually the person, according to the ARB report, who saw the attack as it began on the security system, the surveillance system, notified the embassy in Tripoli, notified the annex down the road. Has the State Department made those two RSOs available to the House committees investigating Benghazi so they can speak to them, interview them, and take their stories? Has the State Department made the other diplomatic security officers on the ground in Benghazi on September 11th available to the congressional committees? Yes or no?
Again, Mr. Nordstrom has testified over many hours already on the Hill.
I'm not talking about Mr. Nordstrom. We're talking about the RSO who was stationed in Tripoli on September 11, 2012. I'm talking about the temporary duty RSO who was on the ground in Benghazi, and according to the ARB, is the individual who actually saw the attack begin on the surveillance system, notified the embassy in Tripoli, and notified the annex down the road. Have those two individuals been offered to Congress to give their story and their testimony about what
Okay. I'm not aware of these two specific individuals, but what I said, and I think this was about a week ago, is that if people want to come forward and tell their stories, that they should come forward and tell the truth. And let me finish. Can I finish my statement, or
security officers who were on the ground at the time of the attack, would they be important witnesses for people to hear from?
could I finish what I'm saying? If I could finish the whole sentence, then maybe I could address what you're saying. What I had said previously is in terms of people testifying on behalf of this department, there are procedures in place, and at a certain level, people testify as government witnesses. They're not always the people who are on the ground, but it's the superiors in their chain of command. Having said that, if there are people that want to come forward and tell their story, this department is not blocking whistleblowers and is not stopping people from telling their story. Some of these people have testified to the ARB and may not have done what they want to do and want to get on. Let me finish what I'm saying. And want to get on and continue their careers and finish the business that they're doing. So we've been very transparent with the Congress. We have shared and had an unprecedented level of cooperation with Congress. And if there are new and outstanding issues that the Congress wants to continue to look at, we'll do so, and we have a mechanism in place through the Secretary's...
What Secretary Clinton said on the evening of September 11, 2012, in the 10 p.m. hour, Washington, D.C. time, the Department put out a written statement entitled Statement on the Attack in Benghazi. It's not about what was going on in Cairo or anywhere else. It was a statement on the attack in Benghazi. She said in that statement, quote, "Some have sought to justify this vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material posted on the Internet. The United States deplores any intentional effort to denigrate the religious belief of others," unquote. That statement was put out before former Navy SEALs Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods died in Benghazi. Who specifically told Hillary Clinton that there were some people blaming this on inflammatory response to inflammatory material on the Internet? Where did she get that idea at 10 p.m. on September 11th?
Look, these are issues that have been looked at in great detail, that have been answered in great detail to the Congress, to the American people, and you're asking about something that is many months prior. And we've been very clear, and the ARB has looked at all of these issues and done so in great detail.
Can I just close out with a few more that are not relitigating other things?
Okay.
The former head of the Counterterrorism Bureau, Daniel Benjamin, has put out a statement this morning.
He has.
In it, he mentions that the first question to arise amongst policymakers that involved the Counterterrorism Bureau was whether or not the Foreign Emergency Support Team, FEST, should be deployed. He said the question of deployment was posed early and the department decided against such a deployment. The decision, he says, was, quote, the correct one. Can you tell us anything about, I mean, if you're prepared to put out this kind of statement, it seems to me you should be prepared to answer questions about its contents.
And the issue of the FEST teams was something that was addressed in great detail in previous hearings. And just to remind people that these are teams that go in to help reset up communications when there's been a terrorist attack. In the case of Benghazi, we had evacuated that post. Tripoli's communications were up and running, and so I think Ambassador Benjamin's statement is very clear about this decision-making.
Two final questions. You've been very kind, as have my colleagues. First, is Deputy Chief of Mission an important job in an overseas post? Is it given to just anybody?
Just broadly speaking, the Deputy Chief of Mission is somebody who is the number 2 person in a mission, and they act as the charge in the ambassador's absence and have a critical role in the mission, yes.
And that requires certain credentials and background, correct?
Again, there's a selection process that goes forward for some of our senior officers and experienced officers, sure.
And to be the coordinator for operations in the Counterterrorism Bureau, would that require certain high qualifications?
Again, James, you're trying to get me into the credibility of witnesses before we've even gotten to a hearing. There are some folks who want to come tell their stories. Let them go out, and they're going to tell their stories to the Hill, and they can say what they want to say. But I'm not going to get into the back and forth.
Greg Hicks did say he thought that the ARB let certain senior officials in this building, particularly Undersecretary Kennedy, off the hook, that security decisions were made at a much higher level than the ARB indicated, and that there was a whitewash of who was really involved.
Well, there was accountability for some senior officers, and you heard Ambassador...
Well, they said that he said that those officers, that the actual chain went much higher up.
Well, at least we're at a bit of a disadvantage here because when, you have people going out to the media making all sorts of statements, we don't have the full context of it. It's a little bit hard to respond to each and every claim. This is something that the ARB talked about. The accountability was held for senior officers, and we were clear where the ARB had very tough findings on the State Department and where changes need to be made, and we're implementing those. So we reject that line of argument.
One last one. I'm sorry. I know anytime a reporter questioning someone at a briefing, at a podium, uses the word intelligence, it provides an immediate off-ramp for the question to say that we don't discuss intelligence from the podium. That in mind, perhaps you can simply assure us that no U.S. personnel on the ground in Libya on the night of September 11 was carrying out covert operations outside the scope of what were then the existing Covert Operations Action Authorities?
You're right, Mr. Rosen. We don't discuss intelligence here from this podium.
But no one was acting unlawfully in a covert capacity for the United States at that time, were there?
American personnel act lawfully. Said, go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
No. I just want to, this is going to be a hypothetical, but I think it's a hypothetical that you may choose to answer. If these three witnesses who come forward, who testify on Wednesday, tell the truth, do you expect that that they will be able to say, or that they will say anything that does not comport with the findings of the ARB?
It's hard to know. We don't know exactly what they're going to say. They've been.
But if they tell the truth,
well, they've been talking
as they will be sworn to.
Look, they've been talking to members of the Hill. They've been talking to other folks, but they've been talking to the media. Okay. But in terms of speaking to us, we don't have the full...
All right, fine, fair enough.
But again, the ARB was exhaustive and looked at these things in great detail.
From what you've seen of the highlights of the portions of the transcripts of the interviews they did with the committee investigators, do you find anything factually wrong about those excerpts?
I mean, again, it's the reason that I hesitate here is I haven't seen the full breadth of it. We're getting sort of these snippets.
Last week you were very, presumably you were under instruction from above to come out quite clearly and talking about a particular lawyer making false statements on national television. So I'm just wondering if you didn't listen to everything that she had to say. You were basing that on a certain parts.
Well, no, we saw the full transcripts there, and that was an instance where somebody went to the media.
Once you're able to see the full transcripts of this, you'll be able to say whether this building believes that these three or... If
there's more congressional testimony and people want to ask our reaction, if there's something that adds substantially to the story of what's happened, we can react to that. But the bottom line is the ARB looked at this in great depth. You have two of our most respected figures in Washington who ran an independent and credible report. And this department, and our focus, and let me just say this is what I said at the top in this line of questioning, our focus is on keeping our people safe. This is a dangerous world. We have diplomats stationed in some 285 posts around the world. Our men and women are putting their lives on the line for their country. And so there's a lot of back and forth about what did or didn't happen. But our focus is on having an independent ARB that gives us recommendations that we can use to then implement to help keep our people safer going forward.
Are you saying this congressional investigation does not have the aims of trying to keep your people safe and find out what happened so that you can continue to do so? Or are you saying that this investigation is merely political?
It certainly seems so far. I mean, this is not sort of a collaborative process where the committee is working directly with us and trying to establish facts that would help as we look to keep our people safe overseas in a very complex environment. We know on Friday we had a sad day here at the department where we commemorated some of our fallen colleagues, and you heard the Secretary and the Vice President speak very eloquently about the service of our nation's diplomats, and so our focus is on keeping our people safe, using these recommendations to better security where we can, and that's our focus.
Did the committee contact you in terms of putting up further witnesses for this hearing?
Not to my knowledge.
On the previous line of, earlier line of questioning was these two RSOs and whether the State Department had offered them. Is that the place of the State Department to offer witnesses? I mean, if the committee comes to you and asks does the committee come to you and ask to speak to certain people and you say yes or no, or do these people, if they can they go directly to these people and say, hey, we'd like you to come?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, the Congress can go to an individual, but the individual may or may not want to testify and prefer to go on with their duties.
And in terms of these two people that were mentioned, although not by name, are you aware that these people have been told that they shouldn't go? Or are you aware that they have been asked to go and declined?
I'm not aware that they certainly hadn't come to. We're not preventing people from going and telling their story. That's not what's going on.
But just to reiterate, the committee did not contact you and say, we would like to speak to these RSOs that were asked about earlier, and we'd like you to put them up.
Not that I'm aware of. I can't speak to every piece of congressional correspondence we get.
Question?
I'll look into it, yeah.
And also, did you, those RSOs all talk to the ARB, is that correct?
I'm not aware if every single one of them did, but the ARB...
All 5 of the RSOs that survived did not talk to the ARB?
I would be surprised if they didn't, but I'd have to look at the exact list.
Sir, if the House committees investigating this were to, in fact, ask to talk to these diplomatic security officers, would the State Department say yes? Or are there any circumstances under which the State Department would say, no, you may not talk to diplomatic security people who are in Libya on 9/11?
People want to talk to their Congress in a personal capacity or tell their stories, they can do that. But in terms of providing government witnesses on behalf of this department to tell the story of something that may have happened, that's generally done at a management level.
So you might say no. You might say no, they can't testify in Congress.
Well, no. If they have a story that they want to tell, they can tell their story. But again, we provide witnesses at a management level who can address...
Just straight up question. If the House committees looking at Benghazi would like to interview the diplomatic security people who were in Libya at the time, whether in Tripoli or Benghazi, would the State Department freely allow that without any fetters?
Again, you guys are asking a lot of hypotheticals about this individual or that individual. I'm not aware of these specific
generally,
requests. But
diplomatic security people in Libya on 9/11/12, is there any reason they wouldn't be allowed to testify in the House committees?
This isn't about allowing people.
Let's make this easier. Can you prevent anyone from going to the Hill if they want to and talking to them?
No, and we don't prevent people from going to tell their stories.
I think that pretty much answers the question. For no reason, there's no instance under which you can gag someone from talking.
We don't stop people from speaking to their Congress. No matter who they are, any employee of this building, from the person who is a cashier in the cafeteria to the Deputy Secretary of State, you can't stop anyone from going and telling their story. Well, again, if people are going as whistleblowers to, in their words, to expose something, that's something that they can do.
Just one last one on this whole term whistleblower. Has anyone in relation to Benghazi actually asked or sought whistleblower protection?
Let me just read what a whistleblower status is to you. Here's the definition we have. Any employee who discloses information that the employee reasonably believes discloses evidence of wrongdoing, gross mismanagement, or waste of funds, an abuse of authority, or a substantial and specific danger to public health or safety is entitled protection under federal whistleblower laws. It doesn't matter if the agency agrees with the substance of the employee's assertions. And let me reiterate, the Department of State does not sanction or tolerate retaliation against employees for protected disclosures.
Do they have to actively seek protection under that, or is it just granted automatically?
My understanding is that it's the employee's characterization of what they're disclosing.
And are any and are you aware that any of these witnesses who are going up on Wednesday have classified themselves?
I believe they have called themselves whistleblowers.
And you are aware of that. The building is aware of that.
I certainly have heard through the media that a couple of them have identified themselves as whistleblowers.
But they don't have to identify themselves to the State Department as such. They can just, if I was an employee, I could call myself a whistleblower for any reason.
If you believe that you're disclosing information under those terms. Okay.
Patrick, aside from the news conference that Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen held upon the submission of their final report in December, were any of the activities of the ARB public?
Well, the report was made public.
I said aside from the submission of the report and the, yes,
the unclassified report was made public. The full classified report was provided to the Hill.
Prior to the finalization of the report and its release, was any aspect of its activities public?
The ARB held their, did their processes, they finished their conclusion, then they presented the report and they came here publicly to this briefing
You're
room.
not addressing my question. Were any of those activities public? Were they televised?
Well, no, it's not like a public hearing. This is something where people come in and
Have
they
any of the
provide
18 ARBs ever been public?
No,
No. Are they required to be public?
no,
No. Is it written in there that there's
In
a
fact-
problem if they're not public?
no. And let me clarify.
Required to release an ARB?
Let me clarify. Thank you for the question, Elise. Only 2 of them have ever even been made public, the ones after the attacks in Africa in 1998 and this attack.
You said the ARB was made available to the Hill. Was
Yeah.
it made available to the entire Hill or only to select committees and...
I believe it was the entire Congress that had access to the classified report.
I only raised those questions about the secrecy of its work because Secretary Clinton, in the testimony that you referred to earlier, talked about how transparent it was. But in fact, we don't know who all they interviewed, and we don't know a lot about what went into that final report, and you can't even tell us why Secretary of State Clinton, the line officer with responsibility for all others in the State Department, wasn't interviewed by it.
Look, we've spoken at length at this. I'm not sure there's a question
The
there.
rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 291, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Number 14, H.R. 291, a bill to provide for the conveyance of certain cemeteries that are located on National Forest System land in Black Hills National Forest, South Dakota.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And on the floor of the House, the second of 3 votes in the only round scheduled today. And in the last vote, we just heard today's State Department briefing talking about Benghazi. Some news being released by the Associated Press at this hour ahead of the House Oversight Committee hearing that's going to be held Wednesday. A team of U.S. Special Forces that was ready to head to Benghazi after the assault on the consulate had ended was told to stand down. That's according to Gregory Hicks, Deputy Chief of Mission for the U.S. in Libya. We're going to bring you the hearing on Benghazi live Wednesday as 2 witnesses who've served the State Department in Libya testify, along with the official in charge of counterterrorism. That's scheduled for 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Currently in this vote, the Black Hills Cemetery Act, sponsored by Kristi Noem of South Dakota. And it says on her website the bill would transfer the ownership of 9 Black Hills cemeteries from the federal government to the caretaking communities that have managed them for centuries. While we're in this vote, we're going to take a look. Earlier we talked with a Capitol Hill reporter about what else to expect in the House this week.
Newhouser is a staff writer at CQ Roll Call. Well, the House is back today after a week-long break. What can you tell us about this comp time bill that's coming up on Tuesday?
Sure. So this is one of the two major bills that we're going to see this week, or the two primary bills that we're going to see this week. The comp time bill is an old Republican idea. They passed this in the 90s. They did it again during the George W. Bush administration, but it never actually went anywhere because Democrats object to it. Basically, it would allow private sector employers to offer workers comp time as opposed to pay and a half for overtime work. So it would allow the workers to accrue that comp time, and they could cash it out later, or they could just take some time off whenever they need it. It's part of Republicans' agenda that they're trying to push to be sort of more friendly to female voters, to minorities, things like that. But Democrats are not thrilled with this idea, and they've objected to it in the past. They say that it would unfairly strip workers of that pay and a half that a lot of workers need and they live on, and it's got a lot of pushback from unions and other groups like that.
Why is this bill a top priority for House Majority Leader Eric Cantor and others?
Well, Cantor has rolled out his new agenda this Congress called Make Life Work. They got drubbed at the polls when it comes to female voters and things like that. So they're making a big PR push, particularly on this bill, hosting roundtables with workers and things like that. They're really pushing this as a bill that would allow women to stay home with their children if they're sick, or to go to parent-teacher conferences, things like that. So they're trying to put on a more friendly face to those types of demographics that they have not done well with when it comes to voting day.
Now, later in the week, House Republicans plan to bring up a bill dealing with spending priorities in case the statutory debt limit is reached. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, this is sort of the big Damocles sword hanging over Congress right now. The debt limit is approaching pretty rapidly. Republicans have this idea of the debt prioritization bill, so that if we do indeed default or pass over the debt limit without extending it, this would allow the Treasury Secretary to pay off interest on debts and the deficit with any tax revenues that come in. Whereas other programs would, I guess, fall by the wayside. And that is, I guess, the primary problem that Democrats have with it. They derisively call this thing the Pay China First Act, or the Pay Some of Our Bills Act. So they would, it would allow the debt and the interest on that to be paid, so we wouldn't technically default. But other programs, like social programs, things like that, would not be paid.
How are the fiscal talks between the House leadership and President Obama going?
I'm not sure that there's too much communication right now. I think everyone's kind of in a wait-and-see mode. This is sort of the first volley in messaging, I think, from the House Republicans. It's very unlikely that Senate Democrats would take this bill up, but it's possible that we'll go right up to the edge of the debt limit, like we have done so often in these last 2 years. But everyone's kind of waiting to see exactly how this will all progress.
Daniel Neuhauser writes for CQ Roll Call. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And here on the floor of the House, we're on the second of 3 votes scheduled for tonight. The third vote coming up soon. The Pascua Yaqui Tribe Trust Land Act places acres of land in Arizona into a trust for the Pascua Yaqui Indian tribe. I want to let you know, too, over on the other side of the Capitol tonight, the Internet Sales Tax Bill passed the Senate with a vote of 69 to 27. Goes on next to the House.
On this vote, the yeas are 390, the nays are 2, 0 recorded as present. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 507, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 15, H.R. 507, a bill to provide for the conveyance of certain land and holdings owned by the United States to the Pascua Yaqui Tribe of Arizona and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
This is the last scheduled vote for the evening. The Tribe Trust Land Act. It would grant 20 acres of land in Arizona into a trust for the Pascua Yaqui Indian tribe. The first two bills of the evening, the Vietnam Veterans Donor Acknowledgement Act and the Black Hills Cemetery Act, also passed this evening.
recorded as present. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure be discharged from further consideration of House Concurrent Resolution 32, and I ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 32, concurrent resolution authorizing the use of the Capitol grounds for the National Honor Guard and Pipe Band exhibition.
Is there objection to the consideration of the concurrent resolution? Without objection, the concurrent resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged report from the Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 198, resolution providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 1406 to amend the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 to provide compensatory time for employees in the private sector.
And referred to the House calendar and ordered printed. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Missouri seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent. Today I want to honor a legendary man, a loyal soldier in the battle for freedom in this great country, Chip Gerdes of my neighboring state of Illinois. Chip suddenly passed away this morning in his home, where he was a loving father and a devoted husband. He was a loyal friend to me and to my family, and a faithful patriot to so many. Chip is the type of person we all strive to be in politics. He reached across all divides to bring people together for a common purpose. I know Chip is smiling down on all of us today, cracking a joke about how serious we are about a man who never missed an opportunity to lighten the mood and who would always fire up the room. Chip Gerdes will be missed by many, but his memory and his fight will continue. We love you, Chip. We already miss you, and we will never stop fighting for what you devoted your life to defend: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Rest easy, my friend. We've got it from here. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Speaker, I wish to address the House by unanimous consent for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to continue the work of the Safe Climate Caucus in focusing on the threats posed to our nation by climate change. The world's top scientific institutions are all telling us that we have a rapidly closing window to reduce our carbon pollution before the catastrophic impacts of climate change cannot be avoided. The World Bank recently answered the question of why we should address climate change. Their report described what the world will look like if we continue on our current path. According to the World Bank, a world that warms by 4 degrees Celsius would suffer from unprecedented heat waves, flooding of coastal cities, increased risks of food and water scarcity, severe droughts, and irreversible damage to ecosystems. Coral reefs would dissolve due to ocean acidification unmatched in the Earth's history. Extreme heat waves would likely become the new normal for summertime. With impacts like these, it is clear that we cannot allow 4 degrees of warming to occur. There is widespread agreement that we must act. Members of the House must take action.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today without prepared remarks, but to join my colleague, Ann Wagner, in honoring a great friend, Chip Gertis. Chip died this morning way too young, a 41-year-old who leaves behind a beautiful wife and a beautiful daughter, and is someone who was larger than life in Illinois and in Illinois politics. Chip Gertis, you never knew what that phone call was going to bring when his name popped through on your caller ID. And it's a phone call that I sadly stand here today to say I will never be able to take again. But it was my friendship with Chip and friendship that he had with others like Ann and many throughout Illinois and Missouri. It's that friendship that made us stand here today and honor him and honor his legacy. Chip Gertis, you were a friend to many and a foe to none. Chip Gertis, rest in peace, my friend. And I will say this on the floor today in your honor. Roll Tide. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Seek unanimous consent to address the House floor for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Last week, Amador Valley High School from California, in my congressional district, competed in the national We the People competition held right here in Washington, D.C. And I'm proud to report that the students of Amador Valley High School's We the People competition team took 2nd place out of 44 participating teams representing their states across the country. The We the People competition is held annually, where each state can send 1 team to Washington, D.C. to compete in mock congressional hearings that test the high school students' knowledge of U.S. history and the Constitution. I met with Amador Valley's We the People team while they were here, and I was thoroughly impressed with their participation, preparation, and knowledge of our history, government, and political system. The students' love of history and civics was welcome to see. They are truly a model for students across the country. I also want to recognize their coaches, Brian Ladd and Mari Wogelmuth, who worked tirelessly to organize the team and prepare the students for this competition. Congratulations again to Amador Valley High School and their students from the We the People program. You make me, our region, and our country proud, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Benghazi happened a long time ago. What difference does it make? Let's get done with this, folks. I don't think anybody lied to anybody. I do not want to spend the next year coming up here talking about Benghazi. Mr. Speaker, these are statements made by the President's Pinocchio puppet press secretary, Jay Carney, and both the current and former Secretaries of State. Americans are learning the White House bungled Benghazi. Now it faces accusations by whistleblowers of intimidation and hiding the facts. Fearful of a terrorist attack, Ambassador Stevens asked for more security. Calls for help were ignored. The cavalry never came, and he and 3 others were murdered. But the White House spin master said after the attack it was a spontaneous protest caused by a video. That was a made-up yarn. The attack was a carefully coordinated, calculated terrorist attack. So why did the administration intentionally and knowingly mislead Americans? The President told a graduating class over the weekend to reject those who say our government can't be trusted. Well, Mr. Speaker, Benghazi is a perfect example of why the national motto is not "In the government we do trust." And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday of last week, I had the opportunity to attend the City Colleges of Chicago's graduation. 7 city colleges with more than 4,000 graduates. And so I congratulate the mayor of the city of Chicago, the chairman of the board of the city colleges, Dr. Paula Wolf, the chancellor, Cheryl Hyman, and all of the faculty and staff. This was the highest number of individuals who have ever graduated from the city colleges of Chicago at one time. I congratulate them, all of the administration, and all of those who made it happen. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, was recently in the beautiful, spectacular, booming country of Colombia, in part reaffirming our relationship with our ally and friend, and also there to make sure that our investments are safe. Well, our investments are safe, and they're paying off by growing the Colombian economy, and for you, the hardworking American taxpayer, growing our economy right here in the United States. Free trade and economic freedom mean that both countries prosper. Now, their economy is growing and the income inequality gap is getting smaller and smaller, meaning a larger middle class. And when Colombia does well, the United States does well. And while we may have a few differences here and there with other countries in Latin America, let there be no doubt Colombia is a bright, shining example for all of the world when we work together. And so to our friends all over Colombia, from the Paisas, the Rolos, the Costeños, Vayunos, Opitas, Llaneros, y Caleños, using your native language, let's continue to share our common dream of oportunidad y libertad para todos, opportunity and freedom for all. I yield my time, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this past Saturday I had the honor of participating in the Walk to Create a World Free of Multiple Sclerosis. Sponsored by the Pennsylvania Western Chapter of the National MS Society, this Erie County event provided hope for people living with MS, their families, and loved ones. Nationwide, the Walk MS 2013 campaign will include 250,000 participants across 700 cities to raise awareness and support for research and services for those living with multiple sclerosis. Now, more than any time in history, there are more therapies in development for MS. Basic and clinical research has led to the development of many of the approved disease-modifying drugs for MS, including new oral medications. Congratulations to the National Multiple Sclerosis Society for having trained or funded many of the leading MS researchers creating these life-changing breakthroughs. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank Lori and Tommy Straub for inviting me to be a part of Team Walkin' Mile in My Shoes. Together, we will continue to work towards a world free of MS, and I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate and thank the community of North Forest and the North Forest Independent School District. This has been a tumultuous week. This school district, undeserving, has fallen prey and victim to the closing of public schools and the public school system. This district that has acceptable schools, this district that has homeowners who have taxed themselves to ensure excellence in the teaching of these children, 7,500 students happy to be in a small pond and being a big fish. It is sad that the TEA administrator has undeservedly offered to close without accepting an offer of compromise. This is time for the Secretary of Education to act on the massive closings of public schools throughout America. This is time for the U.S. Department of Justice to act on preventing the elimination of elected school board members and utilizing Section 5. But more importantly, I want to thank the Ombudsman Coalition headed by Dr. Ken Campbell and President Robinson, the presidents of the Ministers Alliance, who carried on a prayer vigil this last week. I do believe that prayers will be answered, the children will be saved, and we will stop closing public schools in America. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to speak to the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this is actually one of those moments where you get to stand here in front of the House with sort of a happy story. There's an organization out there called Family Promise. They're in 41 states, I believe about 160,000 volunteers, and they've had an issue for years now. They bring in homeless families, but often those homeless families would have a pet, a furry family member. And just this week, PetSmart set up PetSmart Promise. And I've actually got to see this firsthand in Scottsdale, Arizona, where they've actually are taking care of that furry friend of that homeless family that needs to get their life back in order. So PetSmart gets a real call out from us. Family Promise is doing amazing things, and this is just one of those moments where you're very proud of a corporate entity like this stepping up and working with Family Promise to help these homeless families around the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yield back.
Thank you. The chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leave